What's up, guys?
What's up?
What's going on, gentlemen? Welcome to another episode, Waiting for One. It's a pleasure to have you here with us this morning. Wow, look at this. We got the nice shirt, Justin Pena, Jay Houston. You got a little bacon neck going on there.
A little bacon neck.
Jeez. Love you. Man, what an install yesterday. Yikes.
So today we are waiting for Orrin Webb. You guys get a chance to check him out. He's a emotional intelligence coach.
Yeah, the Enmocean. What a great name.
Helps people overcome the emotions and takes a lot from the Carl Jung MBTI teachings and helps you find your shadow personality. You know, use your dark side for good.
Okay.
I'd love to dive into that with him a little bit. I was on his website and he was showing some things that the course covers, identifying your shadow personality. You know, I think a lot of people need help with that. I think a lot of people are like scared to identify it because they don't want to like think of themselves as a bad person, you know, and they got to realize that like we're all kind of the same and like we all have good sides and bad sides, you know. Really curious to see what his thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I know he took me through it, and my shadow personality was I'm the complainer. Is kind of what like when I get frustrated or low energy state, then my shadow personality is more likely to come out, which kind of represents itself as complaining about small details, not really taking in the bigger picture that really matters.
Very interesting. Do you think was he talking about that for like your personal life or professional, or just both? It'll rear its head like that both ways.
So I guess he probably will walk through it a little bit better than I can, but I know it starts off with you have to take the like MBTI personality test, and then based off of your results there, he like compares it to something else, and then from that he kind of dilutes it down to, or condenses it down to his descriptions of it. So like I think he has like the complainer, then there's the indulger. I can't remember the other ones, but so it's it'll be interesting to hear from him.
I'm definitely an indulger. I want to see if that lines up because I love to indulge. Doesn't matter what it is, just fucking.
Which makes sense because like I see your strong suit as being like the innovator, and the innovator's shadow personality is the indulger.
Typically, is the indulger. Got it.
Yeah,
really.
And my strong suit is I'm the guider. That's kind of what my strong personality is. I'm a good supporter, guider, and get on back of the cause. But my downside is that I tend to be the complainer.
Got it.
Cool. Oh man, I'm looking forward to talking to this guy.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
I'm listening. I'm reading that book, Strength and Stillness by Bob Roth. And he talks about dealing with Ray Dalio and Jerry Seinfeld, like all these famous people that do TM, transcendental meditation. For those listening out there, and he brought up something that I never even thought about before. That's so obvious to me. We always talk about blind spots. Well, people, where you can't see your weaknesses. Well, everyone also has bright spots, which are your strengths that you can't see. And I realized this, like a lot of people, I see it in other people, and I realize I've done it my whole life. Like you don't even realize what your strengths are because it comes so natural to you, and it's so like effortless that you're like, well, anybody can do that, but that's not the case, right? It's easy, and you think everyone can do it because it's so easy to you because it's a strength. And really finding that strength is a huge part of, working in a team, and like, of course you can grow in different areas and whatnot, but really people have like natural abilities that they just have developed over time. And like when you're working in a team, focusing on your strength, the things that you like enjoy to do is so important and so key. But yeah, bright spots, man. It's an interesting one.
How did you meet Orrin? Or I guess I can ask that on the podcast and kind of get into that. But.
Yeah, we're actually we are in the same fraternity, but just different.
Oh well, yeah.
Schools. So
okay, cool. So it's like in your network.
Right. Yeah. And I met him at a convention, and we just kind of like clicked.
Hit it off. Nice. Sweet.
Orrin Webb.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Orrin.
Great. Welcome.
Hello. Waiting on Orrin, I heard.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep. You're here. Good to see you. So how's your day going?
Oh, it's going pretty good. Just got off a call where I was making a fellow fraternity brother of Justin and ours aware of the dark side of one's personality. So his eyes lit up. He was like, man, my supervisor needs to read this stuff today.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we were just talking about that while we were waiting for you. We would love to dive into that a little bit more. Justin mentioned that you guys had a call and you tapped into his dark side a little bit. Then he mentioned like what my dark side might be. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get more information.
Yeah, certainly. So I know Justin has shared with me that you all are relatively familiar with Carl Jung, synchronicity, and just some of his work, I imagine, right?
Some of his work. I have a couple of his books sitting over there that I've only briefly grazed. I should probably dive into them a little bit more. But why do you ask?
Yeah, so I mean, Carl Jung was he was a unique figure in the psychiatric and psychological space because he was one of the few that really examined like the spiritual side of things and like symbolism. And I don't know if you all have ever were curious about how come everywhere in the world you see a distinction between the good side, the light, and the dark side, the bad. I mean, you see it in Star Wars, right? You see it in all sorts of films, right? And like, where does that come from, right? You got Jesus, you got Lucifer, you got these distinctions, and he was somebody that really dove into that. And he basically says it all stems from the psyche, like your mind. You have an unconscious part of your mind, aka when you go to sleep, and you have the conscious parts of your mind when you're awake and just kind of experiencing your day to day. And so when I first got privy to his work through the Myers-Briggs type indicator, I was like, okay, I wanted to understand the deeper theoretical aspects underneath it. Like, why does this make sense? And when I dove in, I'm still in it. I'm still swimming in it. But essentially the shadow personality is a reflection of the unconscious parts of your personality, right? The side of yourself that you don't really show often.
Would you say that it's kind of the side that takes over when you are reacting based on impulse?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. You have your subconscious, your body, and then your conscious mind, and actually in this book I've been reading about meditation, they dive into how the prefrontal cortex, which is like the CEO of the brain, doesn't fully attach to the rest of the brain until your late 20s. So like when you're younger, you don't even have like the full ability to really become awake, and it kind of like happens at a later point in your life. Like we don't stop that development process. Mind blown on that. Like,
that is really interesting. And I know Justin, you were into the neuroscience. That's what you studied. Yeah. I got privy to a book called The Neuroscience of Personality, where this guy out in California, his name's Dario Nardi. He actually started doing like, I think it's EEGs, where he was studying how different personality types brains like worked, how they were sending signals and like the brainwave patterns. And it is like fascinating. I mean, basically your personality is just a way in which your brain has constructed neural pathways and what's familiar and so forth and so on. So really, like most people don't get into that because, I mean, your average person is not looking to dive deep into like neuroscience and like all the terms, right? Yeah. But the implications of it are really, really important.
No, that's true. It's really important to understand how the brain works, and that people are all wired very differently. Ray Dalio talks about this a lot because it helps you interact with people in a better way. I know I've had like disagreements with coworkers well, I'm just like, how can he even be looking at the world in this manner? And it's like, I'm looking at it like, but it's really just, it's my fault that I'm not being aware that he just perceives the world in a completely different way, even though how construed it might be from like base reality. I need to be more understanding to that.
Yeah. And that does take work, right? I often say that the beginning parts of it start with self-awareness. And I more or less approach this whole world from the lens of emotional intelligence, and to get people to start to think more broadly and more deeply about their emotions. And by understanding your emotions, you really kind of step into the world of personality. Other people just kind of just step into the world of personality and they're just like, I go on 16personalities.com, I take the quiz, take the test, and I get this cool little icon, and then I step out of it. But I try to help folks stay in it, because imagine your world, imagine your life without an understanding of emotions and personalities,
Or let me ask you a question. How important do you think emotional intelligence, understanding your own emotions, is in regards to success?
I would say that it is a core function of it, a core element of success.
I have a bunch of friends that, they ask me like, do you think I'm intelligent? And like, that's like such a weird question to ask, because I think they're asking the wrong question, right? It's like, are you asking if I think that you have the processing power to do anything that you want? Yes, of course you do, right? Maybe you're just processing the wrong information. Like, I see people that are older that don't have like that self-awareness, and they could be doing anything that they want. They could, but it's not, has nothing to do with their intelligence. It's really just, they're not even aware that they're just constantly acting on their own impulses all the time, and it really just hinders their growth.
Yeah. And if you think about success, just the nature of success, I tend to approach a lot of concepts from their like origins. That's the philosopher in me a little bit. But when you think about success, often in our culture, what's bestowed on us is you got to make a lot of money. All right. You make a lot of money, then you got that freedom. You can do whatever you like. But the problem is, this is where I think Biggie Small said, more money, more problems, is people go out and accrue all these funds, they accrue all this money, and they never truly define success or fulfillment from the inside out. They more or less just adopted it from the outside in.
Yeah.
And then you get a lot of these people that get into power, and they might not even have any, they might be operating off their impulses, like you said,
Yeah.
Jay, right? Yeah. And then you get those people in power, and then you get a lot of wild stuff that starts happening in society.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I feel like there's like the 80-20 rule. Like, the majority of people, to become successful, they have to become the type of person that attracts success, right? But there's obviously going to be cases where, like, if you're going to become successful when you didn't transform yourself into that person, and it just happened, whether luck, whatever it may be. And that's, I'm not sure if that's like a blessing or a curse, or just how, like, we're just, the society's built, who knows? But I know Jim Rohn has that quote that I love. Your personal development will rarely succeed, will really outperform your success, because success is something you attract by the person you become. I love that. I love that quote.
Jim Rohn is, he's on point with that. What about, I wonder what the other two fellas think, Justin and Corey. What do you guys think about success, and how would you define it? I'm curious. How would y'all define success?
Good question.
Yeah. I think for me, success is finding balance in your life. Like, I think Jay and Justin, we've talked about this a little bit before, where they said, how do you define success? And I think it's really finding a balance and harmony in your life where you can be happy both and fulfilled both professionally and personally. So like, and probably exceeding your expectations is another thing I view success as. Like, if you're just doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're projecting, and you're on track to kind of hit your goals and do these things.
Right.
Like let's call it at work, I call that just doing your job. But when you're exceeding those expectations and those goals that you set for yourself, or hitting them on a faster timeline, something like that, that's what I view as success. And then just having it where you feel, going back to the more money, more problems thing, it's like, how do you achieve, that level of success without, getting way too out of control with your problems, keeping those both in check, where the amount of success you're having is relative to the amount of problems that you're having, not
right.
You're not getting off balance there. So balance and harmony is a big measure that I would say for success.
That's a good way to think about it.
I would just add, because I definitely resonate more with the balance, harmony, kind of living in sort of flow. But also to me, success has always been it's not like a point in time that I could say that this is when I'm going to be successful. Like I've experienced successes before, but there's always, I think it's more of like a journey to just constantly keep growing. Because I guess in my mind, if I'm like at a point where I think that I have really succeeded in a lot of different areas, then at that point I'm just thinking of what's the next goal and what's so I don't know, it might be a bad way of thinking about it, like not really taking the time to celebrate the successes, and just always kind of reaching for that next level. But I think it has something to do with like there's just some higher power or source of something that is drawing me towards it, and just kind of working towards it every day, compound interests, and that's success in my mind. As long as you're doing the small little steps each and every day, then celebrate.
And that's another good way to look at it as well.
Yeah, for sure. I would really love, if we could dive into a little bit about the dark side a little bit more. I know Justin briefly brought something up. There was not sure if those were like archetypes or what that was that he brought up, but if you could I know you did this for Justin already, but maybe if you could do it for us, on the air, people would be really, interested to take advantage of your service.
Absolutely. Yeah. What I can do is, let me actually pull up the document and I can share my screen, and then that way you all can see it. So this resource is, I'm actually about to roll out a new version of it. Let me share my screen here. Oh, I think it says it's disabled. Do I get access?
Before you talk about the shadow, what are the 4 overall pillars of emotional intelligence?
Are you able to go into that with us?
Yep.
You should be able to share your screen now.
So emotional intelligence, and let me first say that this started as a theory from Peter Salovey and John Mayer, who I believe John Mayer right now is a psychologist at the University of New Hampshire, and Peter Salovey is actually the president of Yale. And they felt as though and saw that there wasn't a lot of research being done on how emotions can be examined as a form of intelligence, like just being aware of your emotions and then managing them with a type of intelligence. And so this theory then formed, and then I don't know if you all have ever heard of the book Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, but he kind of took the theory and kind of morphed it into something that businesses and enterprises and organizations could use and make it practical. And this 4-quadrant model really breaks down just how emotional intelligence can be understood. So the most important quadrant here is self-recognition, so self-awareness, which the bullet points I have here, recognizing your emotions and accurate self-assessment. The big thing about self-awareness is I find that it really starts with collecting experiences and then being able to dive into oneself, ask yourself questions, examine yourself. Big fan of Socrates when he said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." I'm a big fan of that quote. He also was known for saying, "Know thyself," because if you think about it, without us, we don't know anything, right? We are almost at the center of our experience. And so that then translates into social awareness, which is recognizing other people's emotions and understanding others' personalities. And then when we kind of step out of the realm of awareness which is oriented around, you know, hey, you know, like I've experienced these types of people before. I've experienced myself doing these things. Then we start to dive more into habits, which is the consistency of action, the consistency of behavior starting to form. And that's where you get into self-management, controlling yourself, being able to be motivated and adapt to different circumstances, having a positive outlook. So like choosing certain emotions you want to feel. And then relationship management, which, you know, hey, if you're in a relationship, you know the dealio in terms of working with other people, working with your spouse. You know, more often than not, spouses are different. So managing conflict, collaborating with one another, influencing, leading, right? And then coaching and mentoring in this quadrant. But the reality is no one is, you know, I wouldn't consider myself a master at emotional intelligence, but I am very intentional and consistent in my practice of it, which ultimately is how you arrive at mastery anyway. But that's a quick snapshot of the 4 quadrants of emotional intelligence. And then my process, so the self-assessment piece, I found that any personality assessment you take essentially is just a way to ask you a whole bunch of questions in like 20 minutes. So I often like to say to folks, imagine you went on a date, Jay. Imagine you went on a date and the woman asked you 160 questions. And then at the end of that date, do you think she most likely is going to have a better awareness of you, depending on the nature of those questions, right?
Depends on how many drinks I've had.
Right. So these assessments are just a fast way and efficient way to understand how someone is thinking or perceiving something based on the model that you fit into. And that model is the Myers-Briggs type indicator model, which I use that primarily. It's the most popular one, especially in like businesses and organizations. But once you really get it and you see it, I often say you can't unsee it. So
yeah, guys, we should do this. I took it a long time ago, but I'd like to take it again. You know, Dalio uses it at Bridgewater.
Yeah,
and they have baseball cards to show strengths and weaknesses, you know? And so
super cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's the more I read about it, it just seems like so obvious to me because you get like a snapshot of, you know, of what a person, their capabilities are, how reliable they are. And then like, if you want to assign a task, you just look at the baseball cards, right? And you have to have radical truth and transparency to have it.
Yeah.
But they do a couple things. They do Myers-Briggs and I believe a couple others, but we should definitely do Myers-Briggs.
I like that.
We're trying to like model
our card.
We're trying to model our marketing company off of a Dalio a little bit, like, and follow his method, because I just think that he's just a stone innovator when it comes to company culture.
It's principles, man.
Yeah.
They're golden.
I'm really glad you brought up that name because Ray, and I could break down his personality type based on the model here. And it's funny you use the word innovation because he fits into the archetype or the persona of an innovator. And when I read that book, and he was somebody that, again, went against the grain, in that a lot of folks in HR's realm, they'll say like, hey, you don't want to hire based off of personality type. You don't want to really kind of you don't want to necessarily direct how your team is built based on personality type. And Ray Dalio said, well, actually, I do. and I'm not necessarily going to I'm not necessarily going to discriminate on, you know, can an INFP do a job that's, you know, very detail oriented relative to an ESTJ? It's like, sure, they both might be able to do it, but I want to put the person in that position to do that task who's going to want to enjoy it. And then two, potentially maybe even get it done quicker, right? And so it's not necessarily about discriminating against, it's about optimizing, right? And I think that there's so much value into it. And even my 9-to-5 company, Network for Good, I've talked about, hey, like, we should really consider this because there's a certain personality type that really thrives in our type of sale. So.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And like he emphasizes, to add on to your point, that it's important to have the person fit the role and not create a role to fit the person, right? Otherwise it gets kind of chaotic in a company.
Exactly. So one thing we could go through, so we could either dive right into the dark side piece, or do you want to kind of drill our way down into it?
Drill our way. I'm super into this, dude. I'm just so you know, I'm already blown away. I don't know about these guys, but I'm super into this already.
This is great.
I love this stuff.
Awesome. So I'm a big fan of trying to simplify things. That way it can be digested quicker. And so I created these little graphics, if you will, to understand each of the pairs. So in the Myers-Briggs system, you have the pair of extroversion and introversion. So you're either on one side of that spectrum. And then you have sensing and intuition, which is how you tend to process the world and learn things. How do you kind of take in information and perceive things? Then you have thinking and feeling, which is how you tend to make decisions. How are you approaching a decision-making process? From a feeling standpoint, that would be you're making decisions based on your own personal and social values. From a thinking standpoint, you're making decisions based on logic, being objective, and looking at the process of something. And then lastly, you have judging and perceiving, which this actually indicates whether you are more decisive or you're more flexible and casual with how you tend to approach the world and organize your world. So in here in these little icons, you can see there, I put up some misconceptions. That way people can kind of examine these pairs in an interesting way. So we actually can just kind of go through, you can do a self-assessment, if you will. So Jay, for you, when you look at this dichotomy of extrovert and introvert, looking at the preferences here, where do you kind of fall?
Look, I mean, I would like to think my first reaction is extrovert, but then, dude, I love solo time. Like, I need it, you know, like I love meditating. I love like just being in a hammock by myself, hiking by myself, traveling by myself. Like, I love all that stuff. But I mean, obviously I do get energized when I'm around people, you know?
Right.
So I mean, if I had to choose, I would choose extrovert, but it really feels like it's more like a 70-30 kind of thing.
For sure.
Yeah, I feel like I'm definitely more in like right in the middle, like 49% extrovert, 51% introvert.
Is that okay with this? Did they have that? Can you split it, or are you supposed to be one or the other? You know?
Yeah. So the way to understand it. So this model isn't necessarily like a Myers-Briggs is not a model for like percentages, like measuring percentages. It's more or less a model for description-based model. So the best way to understand where you kind of fall is to think about like handedness, right? Are you left-handed or right-handed? So if
I can still use my left hand, but I'm right-handed.
Exactly.
So
your right hand may be extroverted,
so that's
and like you're dominant, you're confident in your ability to use your right hand, and your introversion may be your left hand.
Got it.
So
okay. That's a great analogy.
Yeah. So then my right hand would be introvert.
Exactly. So I myself, I'm a pretty clear extrovert. I love, just really, I get energized by folks. I love all sorts of experiences that involve a bunch of people. I like big groups. And I'll share with you that I believe, I think Ray Dalio is also extroverted. But let's go to this next one here. And let me see. Corey, did you want to share which one you think you are?
I think my lack of response probably puts me in the introvert category. I would say I'm probably a 60-40, more dominant introvert, and yeah.
Okay.
My left hand would be the extrovert. So.
Gotcha. And I'll also share as we go through this how like there was a mass survey done of like what are the dominant personality types in the United States, and I'll make you all privy to that as we kind of drill down. But then we have the thinking and feeling pair.
I'll be right back, guys. Go to the bathroom real quick.
Yep. So, Corey, which of these pairs do you think you prefer? So make sure dive into a little bit of the words here and see which one matches.
Yeah, right off the bat, just thinker comes to mind. I'm definitely a lot more logical. There's a bit of analysis. I like to research a lot before making decisions, and then I feel like I have a pretty good handle on separating my emotions when the time calls for it. Like, you know, for appropriate situations, if I think this is like, okay, I really need to just make a clear decision, definitely going to do a lot more thinking, research. I can set the emotions aside easier for me. So thinkers for this one for sure.
Absolutely. I'm in alignment with you on that, in that I tend to approach my decision making with the mindset of like being efficient. And
sure.
while it may not always be as effective, I try to tend to be decisive and to try to, you know, get on with things, right? I know life is just a series of decisions and processing information. And I very much so do examine things through a pro-con lens. So the funny thing is trying to describe what is a thinking preference, like how do they decide? Like, take me into that world I'd hear from, say, like feeling preferences, and I just throw out like, hey, a pro-con list, you know? And like, when it comes down to decisions, like we just throw up a pro-con list, and then that is how it'll be made, right? The cost-benefit analysis, if you will. So
yeah, I think that's like my weakness, because I cannot do. I'm definitely a feeler in this example, and I cannot do like pro cons lists. I always just kind of, I trust my intuition, I follow my gut, I go with my heart. There are, you know, obviously there's always exceptions to everything. So I mean, in some senses, it makes sense to, you know, get really analytical and compare the data and, you know, make a very informed decision. But a lot of times, yeah, I do go with just sort of, you know, I got a feeling, and then I go with it, you know.
That's cool.
Yeah, and one thing about the feeling preference is that the decisions is often made based on values. So it's almost like when I'm going with that feeling, or I'm going with that gut sensation, if you will, it's more or less going to be tied to how will this decision impact my values and impact the people around me, right? So let's say, for example, if Justin really values being someone that really helps people's businesses through his marketing, you know, specialty, he finds value in being of support and guidance to those individuals. So, hey, I want to work with them because like I care about their mission, or I care about what are they actually trying to achieve, right? As opposed to, hey, you know, are the numbers really going to be crunched here and like da 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 da. So, well, it's not to say you don't do that. It's to say that you have a preference. It's that dominant hand to approach it the other way.
Yep, that makes sense when you explain it like that. And now that I'm thinking about things Justin's involved in and the things he's expressed to us, it's like, oh yes, this makes sense. Yeah.
Yep. What about for you, Jay?
I mean, I think I'm
a feeler.
You know, I think I'm a thinker. But the way that I look at it is, I feel like a lot of times it makes logical, rational sense to make sure that everyone's benefiting and everyone's happy, you know? So it's hard for me to like gauge it, because like I feel like my logic usually dictates that's the smartest move. I like to think I'm more of like it's more of like a 70-30 kind of thing again, but maybe 60-40.
Yep. And so this one, I would say the thinking feeling dichotomy really does go to the core of your personality, because again, it's your preferred way of deciding. And then
I definitely prefer thinking for sure.
Yeah. And then we get to this next one, which is, I found that this dichotomy, this pair of sensing and intuition is, I think it's the line between, you know, from a political standpoint, conservative, liberal. I see it the way you get like innovative companies versus like kind of like your status quo companies. I see this dichotomy as like quintessential to understanding how people will approach something. So you have sensors that really take in the world through their five senses, and they really trust experience, right? So it's like, I am learning this process based on what I've experienced in the past, right? And does my prior experience really provide me with the confidence to trust what I'm doing, trust the information that I'm getting, right? Tried and true, pragmatic, realistic. And you get the other side of that, you get the intuitive, which is looking at information from trying to connect the dots, seeing the interrelationships and the symbolism or the meaning behind the information that you're getting. So one way to think about it is intuitives tend to lean into possibilities. Sensors tend to lean into reality, right? So where do you guys think you fall?
Yeah, here I'm clearly all the way intuitive, maybe like 10% sensing. Yeah, misconceptions, they are weird. Definitely, I feel that. It's
same here, man.
But it's fun. I like it.
Interesting. So you guys both think you fall heavily on that side?
Oh yeah, I took an assessment. I took the assessment back in 2017. I literally just took it again last week. I can facilitate it and stuff. I got the license and all that stuff. And I'm like pretty much all the way intuitive, like all the way.
Got it. I feel like I would fall more on the sensor side for me. I like to tend to draw on past experiences and like use that as a baseline to judge kind of how do I kind of view and believe that this next interaction should go. I definitely have a little bit of the intuitive side, so it's probably pretty close. It's balanced, but I feel like I tend to err more on the sensor side than heavily on the intuitive side.
There we go. Yeah.
This one's tough for me. I think I'm like split right down the middle. I think I'm gonna have to take the exam to figure this one out.
Yeah, this one we might need the exam to give us a little more guidance here, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say a big distinction in this is when you start to dive into the dark side, you'll be able to basically understand, okay, how do I typically process the world? How do I typically learn about things based on how you are in your shadow? So I'll get to that later, but that's another way I'm able to identify if someone prefers to be more on the sensing side versus the intuitive side.
Yeah.
Another big distinction between these two that people kind of understand is that sensing preferences prefer to lean into the details, right? They want like exactness, and intuitives prefer to be more big picture. So kind of looking at the broad bird's eye view, whereas the sensing preference would be more of like the ant's view, like we on the ground, we got to hit this next thing rather than looking like 6 or 7 steps ahead. And then this last pair we have is judgers and perceivers. Now, the way Dalio talked about it in his book, which I like the way he kind of talked about it. He said, basically a judging preference is not about being judgmental, but it's more about like being planful, being more systematic and methodical with how you approach the world, how you organize your life. So, one way I often see a judging preference is, how neat and tidy is their room, right? Are they always making lists? Do they carry around planners with them? If you ask them to meet, are they like, hey, put some time on my calendar in between 11:15 and 11:45, right? Like, are they really particular with like their time and how they kind of structure it out? And notice the icon there is like a straight arrow. And whereas with the perceiving side, they tend to be more going with the flow, more casual, more flexible and adaptable in that they kind of see time more as like dynamic, right? Time's not as just linear, but it's more like, I'm on my own clock in a way.
Orrin, let me ask you a question. Let's say that Jay wakes up at 5 a.m., has an amazing morning routine, and then he is all these things on the left side, right? Jay wakes up at 10 a.m., like kind of like starts his morning a little slow, a little crazy. Then he's everything on the right side. It's sort of like my light and my dark is just completely based on whether I like worked out, meditated, did all these things. Is that something that happens? It's like, is that a thing or no?
Yeah. So one key thing to remember in all of this is that, again, like you really do reflect all of these preferences in some way or another. Okay. It's just more or less that like, what is Jay most comfortable with, right? Okay. If Jay had to design his ideal life or his most comfortable life, would he be doing the 5 a.m.? Like, I know for me, I'm a Jay preference. Like I assess as a judging preference, but I'm more of a casual Jay preference. Like I do not prefer to wake up at like 5 a.m. Like this is one where I'm kind of in the middle one a little bit, but I do. And when it comes down to my left hand or my right hand, I am a dominant J preference. In particular, the way I kind of work with other people. Like I prefer for others to be timely and to be organized and structured, as opposed to sometimes for myself.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah, I'm a little bit in the middle on this one as well. I remember the first time I took the tests like 8 years ago, I was a J, a judging preference. But most recently, when I took the test, I was the perceiver, the P.
Mm-hmm. Interesting that it changed like that over time. Yeah, but 8 years is a long time, and that puts you back into adolescence essentially still. So I could see that changing. I think for me, I feel like I'm more the perceiver, just go with the flow, being flexible, easygoing. So yeah, but I'm like you and Orrin, where I when I'm dealing with other people, I prefer them to be on the other side of the coin. I want them to be a little more rigid and be on time and task oriented, things like that. So
right on.
I think what Jay was mentioning is like a great segue for the shadow personality, and like talking about like how does the shadow come out, like why do we when you wake up late and you don't do your morning routine, you're just kind of off kilter for the rest of the day. What is that about?
Yeah. So this then goes into these next two elements, which is the shining personality and the shadow personality. So because this can get very complex, my goal was with Enmocean, my business, was to really simplify some of these deeper, more in-depth psychological ideas. And the shining personality would essentially be, that's you when you're in your most comfortable state. That's that dominant hand, if you will, the extroversion, the intuition. For me, it's extroversion, intuition, thinking, and judging. So I'm an ENTJ. And my shadow would be the inverse of that. So I actually was just reading a little bit about Carl Jung today. I'm reading Archetypes in the Collective Unconscious. And he actually says, and this is going to be really interesting, and we're going to drill down into the shadow based on this point. He said that your dreams are you essentially getting privy to your unconscious mind. So think about your dreams in the context of these personality pairs. A lot of my dreams tend to be feeling oriented. And it's very interesting. My girlfriend, a lot of her dreams tend to be very like strange and like very like intuitive and like all over the place, and like running all these different possibilities. So that actually goes to both of our like dark side. And basically to think about the shadow is the inverse of your preferred ways of being, your preferred ways of using your mind, if you will. So I created these 4 personas. So the first one is the giver, trusting others and providing comfort. That would be someone that has a sensing and feeling core or heart of their personality. Then you have the enforcer, trusting experience and being pragmatic. I think, Corey, you said that you prefer sensing and thinking. You would be in that persona. Then you have a guider, making an impact and helping others grow. That would be Justin. He had an intuitive and feeling preference. And then you have an innovator, which would be intuitive thinking, seeing the present and acting on the future. That is, I think that is what Ray Dalio is, as a NT, intuitive thinker. Now, the shadow would essentially be the inverse. So the shadow of a giver is a warrior. And I actually want to just show you how this playbook, which your listeners can get a free copy of, that way they can kind of, dive into and really learn more about. I put faces to these personas. That way it just become a little bit more human. You can kind of feel it out. You can maybe associate it with people you've met in your life. But each giver has certain power skills or way that they kind of express themselves and where they feel most confident and comfortable. And so a giver here, as you can see, harmony, making an impression, being authentic, having a strong ability to recall and use their memory to whether it's tell stories or really engage with other people from a story standpoint. And they have triggers too. Now the triggers is what sets someone off into being in the shadow. So Jay, when you talked about, hey, I hit my routine, everything's going smoothly, I'm in the zone, I'm feeling good. But something happens where you wake up at 10 a.m. or like some catalyst, some trigger led to you having that kind of distorted or off morning, if you will, which then puts you into that unconscious headspace, or like behaving off impulse, behaving off of that dark side. And there are ways to get out of it based on your personality, but people experience this every day. And a bigger concept here also is people experience, like, imagine an entire company going through this, or an entire leadership team being in the shadow, right? Imagine how COVID-19 put an entire society in the shadow, right?
Sure.
So this really extrapolates out. But what kind of questions are coming to mind? I could talk for days about it, but I'm curious as to what is this making you all think about?
Kind of want to see like an overview of all the different shadows. So we have the warrior here is for the shadow of the giver.
Right. And then we scroll down here. We have the enforcer, trusting experience, being pragmatic. A lot of men in leadership tend to be enforcers. And then their shadow is the doubter, insecure, highly reactive when they're in the darkness. The insecurity piece is big. And then they have some additional language around what are some of those triggers. Incompetence is often a trigger, whether it's incompetence of other people or themselves. Strong emotional expressions, like, just a lot of, like, whether it's like a lot of anger or a lot of sadness coming their way, they'll be like, whoa, that's a lot. That's heavy stuff that I might not be used to. And then we have the guider, making an impact and helping others grow. And, some of their triggers, a lot of negativity. Don't be negative around Justin, because it's going to make him less effective. Keep his spirits up.
I'm an
Keep
optimist.
him smiling.
I need to gotta keep the optimism.
But if Justin is in the shadow, becomes nitpicking, and then he starts to become negative, right? So he might start nitpicking different things, might be sucked into the details, and might find himself complaining about all the different things that are not going his way or her way.
Right, because I'm bad at like the details. I think I like to think more big picture, and then I do find myself complaining more when I'm like stuck in the details.
Getting stuck in the weeds. The weeds is not a fun place if you're an intuitive. Like, when I have to read through contracts, absolutely not. Like, I would rather have an AI. I'd rather have an AI just like do it. Like, this is part of the reason I could not be in law. Like, the deep details and the reading and like all of that stuff, I'm like, whew, it would burn me out. But it is a place for me to grow, which is another element of like the shadow. This is the intuitive thinker, seeing the present, acting on the future. Some triggers: unacknowledged core values, physical exhaustion, too many rules. And there are different variations of each persona, by the way. It can be extroverted or introverted. It can be decisive or flexible. And then the shadow of an innovator is the craver. So overindulging, binging on things. That's kind of that underdeveloped sensing side, that sensational side. Innovators tend to, when they're in the darkness, treat their body poorly. So they might find themselves not exercising, kind of just going in on some Oreos, ice cream, pizza, right? Just like going all in on that. I know I do it myself. I am an innovator. I have an NT preference. And then the feeling side, also having a sensitivity to negative feedback. So I really break this down to make it easier for people to understand that, like, hey, the darkness is there, but like, don't run away from it. Really lean into it to understand it, because that is actually your biggest area of growth. And this goes to Carl Jung's central idea, which is individuation. And for you to become all of yourself, the whole person, all aspects of your personality, you want to really work on and develop the unconscious. He says, until you bring the unconscious into the conscious life, the unconscious will always run your life, right? Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will continue to run your life. So a lot of the problems you may face, a lot of the challenges you may face may ultimately have a lot to do with your dark side.
Orrin, how often do you meditate?
Not as often as I should, especially as is a back to balance step for me. But I will say I recently downloaded Headspace. I use that infrequently. And I also picked up the Waking Up app, I believe, by Sam Harris. And I can say, though, when I do meditate, I feel extraordinary. Like when I'm just like out there breathing, like if that's the only thing I'm focusing on, I'm really engaging my senses. It's a beautiful experience. I'm
pretty sure that meditating, of all the personality types you just named in the shadows, meditating helps the innovator the most. You know, I highly recommend doing it twice a day for 20 minutes. Highly recommend.
Oh, the transcendental meditation?
Dude, dude, I'm telling you, man, the energy, it's amazing. I highly recommend diving into it a little bit more.
Justin has sent me a video on it.
Oh yeah, the video I sent you was Jay sent it to me, and I forwarded it.
Okay.
One with Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah, you should dive into Bob Dalio does it. I mean, Bob Roth talks about, I'm reading his book right now. I can't recommend it enough.
It's interesting. I experimented while I didn't do 20 minutes. I think I kind of got into it for like 7 to 10 minutes, and then dinner was ready. But one of the things I noticed was like, I chose a word or sound, and I was like, okay, let me just focus on that and align that with my breathing, and just really just breathe and repeat this word. And the word I chose was wisdom. And the interesting thing about it was like, the word started to just become more of like a sound. It was just like a wah, 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 wah.
That's common, but keep in mind, like when you're doing TM, you're supposed to choose a word that actually has no meaning. So that's very important. So you have to, it typically should be like, they say like 3 syllables should maybe like end in om, So like, and you should end up just making a sound externally slowly, and then even eventually not making any sound, but you're just transcended and just making the sound in your head. You should dive into it more. I'm telling you.
Yeah. I'm definitely gonna, now that I'm aware that multiple folks are trying this, and the benefits are extraordinary. I think it could go a long way, especially in our oversensitized world, right? Like we get hit with stimulus everywhere we go.
Yeah.
Cool.
So in thinking about each of you all's shadows, Corey, you mentioned that you think you're an enforcer. So when you think about the shadow of a doubter, does any of that kind of come to mind? Let me pull it back up.
Yeah, I would say when I get into that kind of mindset, I probably often start doubting myself a lot. And it's really, I would describe it as almost paralyzing, where I'm doubting myself to the point where I can't even, think of what to do next, what my next action should be. And it really prevents me from, getting started on a lot of things. And then that leads to, further like kind of lack of motivation, like, oh man, I can't even take the first step. So like, why even try? Why even bother? Yeah, that definitely, makes sense when I think about it on that level. So.
Yeah, and I would say just the mental health implications are really crucial, because oftentimes when we step into the emotional realm, we often don't even have the language to either classify or name these things. And so, more or less people just say, I'm depressed, I'm anxious. But what if it was more than that, right? What if there was something else happening that could help you feel more confident in your ability to kind of manage your mind? And that's really where emotional intelligence comes into play.
Got it.
What
about for you, Jay? Do you think you're a craver? You think you're a complainer?
Definitely a craver. Like I indulge, crave. Like it's not even close. It's not even close. Like especially like if I like end up something happens and like subconsciously I'll get depressed. Like I will just consume, indulge, whether it's movie, food, drugs, sex,
video
whatever
games.
It's just like
yeah.
I really have a hold on it now. Growing up and like in my 20s, like it was just running rampant,
Right.
But like now it's like I'm so aware of it, that like I'll start to see it and I'll just put a butt in it, Like, I feel like I really got it on, it's tamed.
It's that transcendental. You're transcending.
No, for sure. I mean, there's something going on where I'm becoming awakened to it, but yeah. No,
right on. And then another key thing I think about is just like, which could obviously be a whole nother episode, but the relationship component. Like, as an innovator, do I more or less find myself wanting to be around givers, right? Because they're opposite to me. Like, for example, I'm an ENTJ, so extroverted, decisive innovator. My girlfriend is an introverted giver. So she's a Grace. We scroll back up. And like the interesting thing is when they say opposites attract, we actually have a totally different worldview. But she helps me when I'm in the darkness, and I help her when she's in the darkness. Sometimes I trigger her getting into it anyway. I try to forget out. We all, exactly. So that's a whole nother domain of this, which is really on the side of social intelligence and like being a more productive and useful teammate and a support system for others.
Cool.
Very cool.
I
hope y'all enjoyed this.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I've been meaning to dive into the shadow work a little bit more. I'm glad it's more clear for me now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some clarity.
It just adds an extra layer of like awareness, to ourselves and then to others.
Which Carl Jung book do you recommend people read first?
Oh man, Carl Jung, he got some heavy stuff. I read the first book was Man's Search for Soul.
Okay.
Man's Search for Soul. It's not super dense. He kind of covers a lot of different ideas of his, and when you really dive into it, you'll be like, huh, I should have dove into this a long time ago. Right.
I keep hearing about it like over and over and over from a lot of people I respect. So it's like, God, I really got to dive into it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
My first Carl Jung book was those papers on synchronicity. Those are pretty interesting.
And Orrin, what's your website? Can you dive into stuff about like what you're doing and all that?
Yeah. So my website is Enmocean.com. I actually can pull it up here really quick.
Sure.
So it has a funny spelling because I'm intuitive, that's how it is.
That's a great way of doing it. It's awesome.
Right?
Yeah, I thought it was cool.
Yeah.
Making it stand out a little bit. But the whole idea of Enmocean was to help people get more in tune with the highest version of themselves, and having that access point be emotional intelligence training to make oneself more aware and to be proactive rather than reactive in this type of development. That's a really big thing I want to harp on, is because oftentimes you'll go through life and life's gonna mess you up, right? Life's gonna throw curveballs at you. Life's gonna hit you, right? And you may start to just develop this stuff just by trial and error. But what if you could get ahead of it, right? What if you could be proactive in, hey, I know if I'm gonna be on this team, these people are gonna trigger me, so how can I be proactive? And so I provide an online course that is a 6-week-long program that has live coaching where you essentially map the entire process, right? So you take the assessment, the official one through the Myers-Briggs company, and I facilitate the entire assessment for you. And we go through the process of self-discovery, mapping out your triggers, identifying your shadow personality, and start the work of developing healthier habits. So if you're an innovator, you come through a program, we're definitely going to talk about how to engage in more active meditation, right? How do you just make that a part of your daily routine? And then ultimately you wind up being a part of a community where a bunch of people of different preferences are there to really help, one, hold you accountable, but two, just engage and keep it top of mind. Because I often say, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Oh, yeah.
I like that. I got a lot.
Yep.
Awesome.
How about it? So, yeah, if listeners want to dive into the work, my playbook is free on my website too, so they can very easily go and grab a copy of that. And I always am looking to add students into the course for a more detailed, deeper dive, and always looking to help people out because we're all in this together,
Yep. Absolutely.
Awesome, Orrin. Do you have any more questions for Orrin, guys?
Not with 2 minutes left, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, Orrin.
Orrin, thanks so much, man. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you all, and I appreciate one diving in and inquiring about this important stuff, because we all have emotions and we all have personalities, so it's best to be aware of them rather than not, right?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think the next time we have you on, we'll get into the relationship side.
Hey.
Yeah.
Social awareness.
Yeah.
Bring our girlfriends.
Right. Yeah. Bring your ladies on the call, and we can dive on in. But it's been a pleasure, y'all, and I appreciate y'all having me on.
Thanks,
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Joining.
Awesome.
All right.